This time we are in the US at the epicenter of the entrepreneurial world, in Palo Alto, Silicon Valley. Home of Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, and countless others. A truly inspiring place of innovation and creativity. Here we are uniquely privileged to visit the Institute for the Future, Stanford and Nordic Innovation House, in order to be exposed with the latest ideas, tools and inspiration for a better future. Our journey will start with Sean from the Institute for the Future.
We're a research organization that's focused on bringing ideas and thoughts and systems of thinking about the future to the masses. I guess on any given week there's about 100 different tours traveling around Silicon Valley trying to get with different names: Innovation Journey, Learning Journey, Innovation Tour, and we're one of the stops for a number of these groups. We realized at some point a couple things. You can't predict the future, but there is utility in looking at provocative future possibilities. Forecast 1, Forecast 2, Scenario 3, Scenario 4. And when you start to really dive deep into these futures, using plausible, internally consistent rationale, it could happen based on today's reality, today's business models, today's technologies as they unfold and evolve. If it's internally consistent along those lines, it's really useful as a way to question the future. Think about what's the best thing that could happen, what's the worst thing that could happen, what kind of technologies would one need to survive or thrive in that future, who should you partner with, does your leadership have the courage to bring you to that future, is it a legal future, what skill sets does staff need, or what kind of skill sets do you need to recruit for to survive or thrive in that future. And through going through that process, you're going to ask a lot of questions and get answers, but the goal is to identify a preferred or desirable future. And we've also evolved in that our founding method would be the expert opinion aggregation, the Delphi technique. One of our founders developed that at AT&T before he came to the Institute. And it's now one of 22 techniques that we use. So we're not rooted into one method or one process or one technique. We're open to whatever technique makes sense based on the context of the research project. What's the desired deliverable? Who's the audience? What's the time frame? What's the budget? So based on a lot of criteria, you can figure out what are the best techniques or techniques to use to get to the end point.
What would be some of the favorite tools that you have been exposed to?
So I found 3 that I really like to teach in this short half-hour window. Number 1 would be shifts, big shifts, being aware of big shifts. So going from an old way to a new way. Some people would say it's a change in paradigm. But we see historically society's gone through big shifts. We were a hunter-gatherer society, then we're farming, moved to farmers. Then we were farmers and we moved to manufacturing. Now we're manufacturing and we're moving to what's next. A lot of Europeans like to call it the fourth revolution, which encompasses just every new technology that we're dealing with now. But it's not just technology shifts, it's business shifts, business model shifts, it's emotional shifts. So some shifts that are kind of obvious nowadays would be we're moving from owning things to accessing things. Then to support a shift, you need data. Everyone loves data. We live in a world of Excel spreadsheets and numbers that help us guide our decisions. The future hasn't happened yet, so there's no facts about the future. The future is all fiction. And because the future is fiction, you need stories, you need provocation, and you need some things, fodder to be the glue to bring these stories together. So the data that exists for shifts would be signals. And a signal is a signpost of tomorrow, a suggestion that we're moving in a general direction. So it could be a new business model, a new law or regulation. So that's 2 big shifts or shifts in signals. And a third would be 2 curves, which was created by one of our presidents, Ian Morrison. Ian came up with an idea that organizations grow in kind of an S-curve form slow, and then once they hit kind of their sweet spot, they accelerate, and at some point, organizations kind of plateau. A nice example would be Blockbuster Video, the video store chain. So it grew slowly, expanded, and then kind of plateaued once it reached geographic saturation here in America. And once it reached saturation, it kind of teleported over to becoming an incumbent, and everything kind of changed there. Instead of focused on scale, the focus is now on maintenance, just maintaining an existing business model.
Why is futures thinking important?
If we don't think about where we want to be, we won't get there, and we'll become victims of the future. And humans tend not to want to be victims. We want to control our destiny. We want to be able to create and make what we want. I'm going to paraphrase the phrase. I can't remember even who said it, but you can make your own future. The best way to create a future is to make your future. So making the future is a very common phrase here. And one of our colleagues, Jane McGonigal, has a phrase: before you can invent anything new, first you have to imagine that things can be different. And in the future, everything is different. So if you start to explore the future, this is going to sound counterintuitive when I say it, but as you start to explore the future and ask it questions and get some answers, once you start doing it long enough, when the future starts to unfold, it doesn't seem odd or disjointed. It actually starts to seem familiar, and even as a memory, because you've been thinking about it so long, you've experienced it before other people have experienced it. If you spend enough quality time there, and then as it evolves, it's not so foreign to you anymore. You're not kind of blindsided by it. Another one of our researchers, Jake Dunnigan, likes to say, and I don't know if this is his quote or someone else has said it. You want to be blindsided by simulation, not blindsided by reality. So if you talk about the future and what you could do and how you'd go about doing it or dealing with it, it's a lot cheaper than to wait for the future to happen and then react or deal with a new reality. Being prepared is much more desirable than not being prepared, and using foresight techniques, you're able to do that.
So from foresight to insight to action, in this insight to action, Stanford has developed something called life design, where you actually can start then designing the future that you want to live and explore.
Right. I would say we complement that pretty well. Our angle on it would be we always had this foresight, insight, action since I've been here. We've added a fourth word probably within the last few years, which is prepare. So prepare, foresight, insight, action. Before you can actually think about the future, you have to prepare your mind. We're really not designed to think 10 years out. That 10-year vision seems to be foreign or different, so we have to somewhat get comfortable with it. So prepare is the first step. Once you're prepared and ready to talk about the future, that's when the provocation comes in. Provoke your mind so that you can come up with insights. And then I just mentioned this a few minutes ago. Taking those insights, pulling them together to identify a desirable or preferred future. Once you have that desired or preferred future, put it into play. Create a plan or a process around it. You're taking action against that future, all the while being aware that other people, other organizations, other entities are doing the exact same thing. They're also going on this path of creating their own future. So you can't just create your future plan, go after it, and be happy. Let it play out for 5 to 10 years. You have to be looking at what other people are doing and how they're doing it, and constantly be sensing about what's happening. So it ends up becoming a cycle, not a straight line process. So foresight leads to insight, leads to action, which informs foresight. So it becomes a never-ending cycle. But again, you can use it for work, or you can use it for your individual life plan. So I think it really complements what you've been talking about that's going on at Stanford.
Next, at Stanford, we are grateful to meet with Kathy and Gabrielle from the Life Design Lab, an inspiring initiative based on a New York Times bestseller book by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans on life design that has had life-changing effects on students, educators, and people all over the world. In a nutshell, what is life design?
In a nutshell, I'd say it's get curious, talk to people, try things, tell your story. It's this process of iteration where you explore who you are and what you want to become.
So basically tackling with the help of design thinking your own life.
Design thinking is an innovation process, and it's something that is really useful for problems that are difficult to tackle, that are ambiguous, that change as you work on them, that can't be solved with money, that perhaps you don't even know what kind of an answer you're looking for. And so design thinking is uniquely suited for life, because that's how life is. Who knows what's going to happen? Tomorrow something could be completely out of your control. The reality that you're experiencing today could be completely transformed. And so having a process to deal with that ambiguity is really useful. And I find that what I like about it is there's enough process that you feel like you know how to take it a little bit of a step forward, but there's not a should. There's no right answer that is being imposed upon you. And so you're held in a structure, and for some of us, structure is very useful, but you're not constrained.
It's a thing that we probably are all doing, and it's just a matter of how we might pay attention to it in a little bit more of a productive or intuitive way. So if you think that designers use certain skills and tools to get themselves unstuck. So sometimes we say designers are no more creative than the average person, but they love getting unstuck, and they have all these tools they've built up to get themselves unstuck. In life, we get stuck a lot, and so it's useful to also have a set of tools to get unstuck in life. And because like you said, life is very much a wicked problem where you don't know the end definition, right? It's not an engineering problem. In engineering, you know, okay, for the bridge to be this high, I know that I have to solve my way forward to get the bridge just so. But your life is not a perfectly standing up bridge. It's an unknown future, and it's an unknown entity. And so design thinking as a problem-solving methodology works particularly well for unknown futures or unknown ways to go about futures. And in life, sometimes we think something's going to happen, and then the context completely changes on us. So having a set of tools and ideas, a space to reflect, to intentionally navigate those periods is what life design is really about. And the reason it's accessible is because it's design thinking. It's a visual methodology. It's not necessarily a philosophical approach. So it's a really hands-on integrative approach that anyone of different belief systems can use. And when we teach this, we say that, it's really the mindsets. You can use the design process. The process is a helpful teaching tool, right? Anyone new to design thinking or designing your life, it's really useful to have a process to come back to. But the mindsets or the underlying behaviors, as you noted, curiosity, bias towards action, reframing, being able to change your perspective on a context, even if you can't change the context. These are insanely helpful, and that comes with experience, right? Like someone's not born out of the womb ideating or being generative or being curious. That actually takes practice. And I guess that's what we're saying here, is that you can build muscles around some of these mindsets so that they become more intuitive. The competency for them becomes intuitive as opposed to something you have to think about every time you do it. And that's a really beautiful thing.
How would you describe life design as a movement today?
I think Bill and Dave, when they wrote this book, had no idea how popular it would be. And with the book, it really has become a movement because people all over the world have read this book and have found it to be useful to them. And folks from all over the world have come here and studied with us as a lab so that they can teach this at their universities and colleges and community colleges.
Over 135 global universities employing life design on their campuses in some way, shape, or form. And these prototypes or programs that they're launching look so different from one another, which is so cool. The movement is in helping students of all different shapes and sizes and varieties feel a little bit more agentic, in control, and less anxious about their future. It's also empowering educators. I mean, the amount of people I've talked to this year who got promotions, who are moving campuses to become the dean of something, who now have life design in their titles, who are creating life design labs and institutions at their own universities. I mean, we're talking like hundreds of people. It's really phenomenal.
Throughout history of human life, there has been different kind of theorizing about what is the good life, and there's of course empirical. We are all living through our lives, but what this is actually adding is some kind of process or a method.
Exactly.
To really finding out.
And it's a method of trying things. So what's good for you today might not be what's good for you tomorrow in terms of the good life. what you need today, your priorities today, the things that matter to you today may shift. And life is like that. There are seasons, there are transitions, there are things that you're doing today, and there are things that you'll do tomorrow, and they may be tightly related or they may be quite different. And trying to figure out the path, which is often quite windy, is part of the adventure if you frame it that way. Or it can be terrifying and you can stay stuck. And so what I like about this process is it frames it in the terms of an adventure. And that if you stumble, it's okay, you just get up and you try again.
So many good thoughts and tools to digest and bring back home. Thank you all. However, our journey is not over yet. In our next episode, we will visit Nordic Innovation House and learn about its role of helping Nordic companies to establish themselves here in the Valley.